Hey, Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be talking about sort of mixing loud, meaning while you're being creative, how do you deal with the mixing stage of things? So a lot of times, so when you go through, like I went through school for mixing and a bunch of other stuff, and so they teach you all these things like do this, don't do this, watch out for this, these things are dangerous. But almost like 80% of the stuff they tell you is true when you've got the stuff already in front of you. It's been recorded, it's been shaped to what it's going to be. You just have to make it sound good and make it all fit together in ways that really make it shine. But when you're in the middle of the creative process, when you're in the middle of doing the thing, especially if it's sound design, it is so much more different than what they teach you in school. So we're going to be talking about right now some of my approaches to making things sound pleasing while it's still not mixed formally, but it sounds pretty good for just I'm in the middle random progress of my song and I want my kick to sound not junky. So cuz I've seen some EDM artists like turn in their stuff to some really famous mixers. I was watching a video the other day. I can't remember his name, but this guy was mixing this song and the originals just sounded like trash. I'm like, I do not know how that guy lived with himself while working on that track. I did not like it. When the guy was done mixing it, it was really cool. So I guess that's just the way he worked. But for me, I want things to sound, reasonable while I'm going through and working on stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about this. So, for example, I get to my drums, and if I go to my drums and just turn off the effects, let's go to the drums. They originally sounded like this. And they're already really loud. There's just a bunch of problems. If I bring in my bass, I want that to be loud. There's just all these things that could happen. And so if I were to throw this in my mix as is, like I get an idea of where my drums are gonna be when I mix it, but that's not gonna work for me right now. So I'm gonna do a couple things, and yes, they'll get louder, but they'll also get louder in sort of a good way. So here it is with the effects on, right? So it's quite a bit better. It's still not where it needs to be. That's what the mixing is going to be for. But it's something I can sort of handle and judge a lot easier. So one of the things that happened, if we were to like look before and after at these things, is listen to the snare before we did our processing. So it pops out pretty okay right here. It's still not what it needs to be, but it's better. And over here though, it's just like buried. So I was like, I need to do something about that, so I get the feel for what that beat is gonna mean when it pops out properly. So what I did was I just found the fundamental and boosted it a little bit. This will work for most snares. Sometimes the snare is based on like the harmonics over here. Usually you have a pretty good idea when you open up your EQ what you want to do, but just a small boost to fix it. And right now it pops. Now that's like, I'm like, that's actually pretty nice. This though is still kind of buried, but it pops out more. I can hear it a lot easier. So for now, I'm fine with that. Well, before the mix down, it sounds cool to me. I could try some pretty interesting stereo things with snare drums that I found that work pretty well depending on the nature of your snare. So it's like a really short, sharp snare. So I might be able to get away with some interesting stereo panning things with verb and stuff that could actually make the snare sound a lot bigger than it is. Because that's sort of this sort of a snare is sort of an interesting one to talk about because it's so short. So do you want it to sound big? Like for example, if I put just like a verb on it, high passed it or low cut, whatever, and turn the wet up, but then set it to side. So already it sounds like you can already tell the character of the snare. Let me play it for you a little bit more because that was kind of fast. The snare just pops out so much more just by doing that. And it's pretty interesting, but it's not necessarily what I want to do. But I use tricks like that to sort of help it. And that was like a really fast setup, as you saw. But I'm just not sure as a mood that's what I'm going for quite yet. So that's something I'd have to do like creatively, sit down and be like, oh, I don't know. But while I was working on my drums, I worked on them separately. But when I start working on my bass, I got my bass now. But when I combine them, what am I going to do? For the kick is an interesting guide too. So if I take the processing off the kick, just listen to that first hit. It's like where to go. And this, honestly, it's a pretty big moment. So maybe we'll go for a more vulnerable kick. But there it's fine because nothing's happening. And so we want something sort of in the middle. Like right there, right? Okay, let's use that as our example. That's also, you want to be careful on where you sort of use as your reference. So, okay, the first thing I did was I found a frequency I specifically liked in this kick. And if we listen to this kick by itself without this thing on, it sounds like this. Okay, so it's very, very short. I dig it. But it needs a spot assigned to it in the mix that it can be. It needs somewhere that says, this is your seat. When you walk in the room, it's got its name at that chair. So I chose to use a boost right here. Some people do cut. Some people would do general boosts in the upper end to increase snap. But I wanted a low boom, 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 boom to pop out. That's what I wanted out of this kick. And I was going to use, well, I wasn't going to use, I used this EQ in Maximus, a multiband compressor, to do this. So if we just listen to, okay, so here it is. And just pay attention to the low end because we didn't touch the high end. And then this is before it was. After. So you can hear a little boom, boom. And when you go over your speakers, like monitors, this is a big difference. It feels like it pushes you now. Before it wasn't pushing. Over headphones, you can't really tell. You sort of have to know that's what's going to happen. And then when you do your reference mix, you'll hear it and you can make those adjustments. Okay, Viper's protecting me. Thank you, Viper. So next up, we have Maximus. This is where I shaped the upper and mid. I didn't use the EQ because I wanted to shape the envelope of how this thing attacked my sound. And did I turn on? Yeah, I turned on linear phase because I wasn't digging what it did originally. I'm not going to talk about that move, but it's covered in the Maximus from the ground up. If you want to know, if you run stuff through Maximus, it will change just because it ran through Maximus a lot. It's not like the EQ where you really have to listen to hear the difference. This one's like there's a big change going on. So you're probably going to want to check out the linear phase filter option. So the low end is being custom boosted, and it's being boosted according to like what I thought. So if I just do a general boost as it reaches the max point, it's going to affect the envelope in a way I didn't think was that cool. So I decided it would be better to have a faster offset at the beginning of the sound, which is generally going to be the upper frequencies of the low end of the kick. Okay, that was confusing to say. Here's our band, right? These are all the frequencies that go into the low end of the low end band. And then these upper frequencies will usually appear earlier than these lower ones. It's a little more apparent when you do it with a full band, but here that it tends to happen. It's just a small thing, but when you're making adjustments like this, it can really make a difference. So this is before Maximus. So we still want our high end to ring out, so I'm going to turn on Maximus now. So you can hear it quite a bit more now. And everything's still really loud. Like it still doesn't pop through the way it should, but it's a lot more easily noticed. This one has another sort of an interesting boost. So my mids are coming up and I want a pop. It's also responsible for sort of the transient of the kick now. What you're hearing now comes from this. And then the high end is just a general boost. This will improve clarity. Like if I were to like turn the compressor off and then I'm like, oh, I want it more clear, so I'll turn that on. So that's what's going down right there. And then in the mix, I can mix everything accordingly in sidechain because there's no side chaining right now. I was like, I'm not dealing with that right now. So that's what's going on. Depending on whatever it is you're producing, sometimes you'll spend a lot more time mixing up front. Okay, and then there's the hat. The hat's not that crazy. Took the low end out because I was like, I don't need this constantly down here because there's a lot going on. This is, yeah, don't need that. A slight boost is actually these two guys, band 6 and 7, the high shelf and then just a little peak filter can have an enormous impact on how it sits in a mix when everything's thrown together. I decided I wanted my hat to sit right around here. And usually the high end on some hats is very, not usually, a lot of the time they're very bright. Because if you're getting them from sample packs, that's just what they do to them sometimes. It depends on where you get them from. So in this particular case, I was like, this is a little too bright for me. So I touched it down a little bit. And to me, that's like a big deal. Some people are less sensitive to the high end. It depends on your hearing. So listen for the hat. All right, that's the hat now. And then here's my hat after. So you see, it sounds almost like it's been pitched down. And so listen to it before and after. And it's also the line I'm playing with it is sort of a unique line. This is sort of a stranger hat line than normal people would normally write. So that's what I'm doing with my stuff here. And you see there's none of this is going down. None of this mixing is like real mixing yet. Now, I still had the problem with my kick clashing with my bass. And so I removed the bass. If I take away these moves, even with what I did to the kick, now the low end is just a complete disaster. And if I get rid of what I did to the kick, that was what it sounded like when that guy was working. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can't hear, like everything's on top of everything else completely. So just to show you this, these are substantial improvements because I'm showing you like step by step. But when I take all the steps off, it's like, whoa, there is some problems here. So these combinations can be really powerful for just helping you get a feel for where it's going to be. There was another thing I did with the sub bass. Okay, so we have this bass thing down here that just eats. This guy just eats stuff. It's just a hungry guy. So the sub bass is a harmer that is just got a low pass filter on. It's one of these. Okay, it's been low pass completely, but it has the sub at being output, and so there's still some harmonic series. And then I thought, oh, it'd be cool to like overdrive it some. So I used the soft clipper first step to bat. So I turn it down using this soft clipping. And then I wanted to use driver, which I found a lot of interesting tones out of driver, but it's that darn resonance as the envelope triggers it that I just wasn't feeling it. So I had to go with a lower resonance. So this is a very interesting move because I had to pick a resonance that would enhance the tone, but also not clash with the kick. Because if I boost, so I'm at 2.8, I got to remember that. But if I boost it up, you get whoop at the end. That's not okay. So I took it down to 2.8, and instead I got this. And so it will pop right where I want it to. And so I set this by ear. And all these frequencies, all these knobs are interrelated. Like this is actually a really complicated ordeal if you really want to get what's going down here. So basically I distorted it and had to be really careful about how I did it. And that's what's going on there. Before, without driver, that's all it is. And I'm like, no, I want it to have some upper stuff going on. And I'm also EQing it. So this was the original. And then I said, okay, that's not going to work. So I've EQ'd it. This is a vintage EQ. I grabbed this because I love the way this thing sounds and responds. So I gave it a slight boost and then a cut. And I was just doing general tone shaping to find something pleasurable. And I was like, that's nice. But then I was like, when I played with my track, I was like, that's no longer nice. So now I needed to EQ it and do it properly. So this would be like the sound you'd give the mixer. And then this is what the mixer would do. They'd do like that. That's all they would do. So if I play this, though, in my track and demonstrate to you the problem, it really clashes with the kick. Just a ton. By themselves, you can hear it. It's actually pretty cool. And if these were the only two elements, they'd be fine. But they're not the only two elements. A lot of people will mix these things separately and get a really clean thing going, but they forget. They have strings. They have the bass going on. They have a bell. They've got all these other things happening that influence how these things sum together. So we're going to listen to it as a whole. And our kick just sounds completely diminished right here. And so I'm just looking for a way to minimize this. So what I do is I grab an EQ. And as you see, it's a pretty severe EQ. And turn that on. Check it out. So here's before. And after. So it pops out just that little bit more, and it makes it just a lot more clear. So what's happening is I'm lopping off all that high-end stuff because that's just taking up spectrum for the phaser bass to sort of shine. And then this is the specific frequency the kick was boosted at when I did this originally. Now it's actually, I believe, at 50 hertz. But the band has been widened a touch. This is hugely responsible for my kick getting through. And the way you just set that up is you just go to your kick. You just look, where is this at? I'm like, oh, 50 hertz. So I come over here. At the time, it was 52. I've made a couple changes through these as I've done some of these tutorials. So I go back to my sub bass, and I could like make an adjustment to like 50 hertz, make it really severe. It's not that important to this sound. Now there is second order harmonics, not second order. I'm not sure if that's like a thing, but anyways, the second harmonic in these sounds will also contribute hugely to the tone of the sound. Now the kick, since it's transient, it's like a complicated ordeal because its harmonics are all weird. But yeah, with this, I would want to look and take a good look at the frequencies around it because it's this range that's going to cause me problems. And so when I do my mix down, that's what I'm going to be paying attention to is stuff like this because I still want it to pop out a lot. And sidechaining probably be the answer to some of this. But I didn't do sidechaining. You could easily set up a sidechain for something like this though, and it would immediately sound way more clear. You have to ask yourself, is your song going to be driven by your bass or your kick though? And this is, I've added the low end to the kick. So then I might ask myself, do I want my kick to be supplemented by my bass? And then I ask myself, what is my bass line doing? And I say, well, my bass line is doing something that's not, it's like providing a supporting role. The bass line is not doing enough though to be a rhythmic center. Except for this like do 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 do. It's like, it's just not enough. Where the kick's like do 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 do. So I'd want to make room for my kick probably more than my bass line. In trance, see the thing is people will listen to all these trance producers, these new guys listen to all these trance producers who make these videos and they say, oh yeah, I should always do this. But the thing is the bass lines in trance play a role and is as rhythmically as important as a kick. So of course you can do that and it's fine, but it does not translate over to other genres. So yeah, just keep in mind the role of what your things are doing. But anyways, that's some of the stuff I did to make things more clear. As far as the piano and the high woods and stuff, these were largely just choices. So like, I just have a lot of space at the beginning, so things will just fit together nicely, and I can use verb and stuff. These are all creative decisions. But as far as that clashing stuff, yeah, the drums can just be a nightmare when you're being creative. So I thought I'd do a short little thing on some things that I do. If you do something different, let me know. Maybe you fundamentally disagree with what I'm saying and you're like, you're dead wrong. You know, do whatever floats your boat. I do a separate mix down. Maybe you prefer to do your mixing as you go and you just monitor louder, or maybe you just mix really loud. Some people do that, but I mean, like, I'm pretty sure I could get a cleaner mix than you, but maybe you want a muddier mix. Maybe that's part of your sound. I feel like that's sort of an excuse, but you know, maybe that's just the way it is. There's a lot of my older stuff that I'm like, man, I need to remix this, but I have so much other stuff going on that I'm just like, I'm just going to move on with my life for now. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Support me on Patreon and have a blessed day.